I'm Powell. I'm a children's author, and over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to give you a crash course in creative writing. For me, writing is all about unleashing your imagination and producing a story that you enjoy. You should always write for your own personal pleasure and not worry about what anybody else thinks. That's the most important thing. Just do it for fun, because if you enjoy it and you have fun, you will write more. And the more you write, the better you'll get. Pretty simple, really. However, we can apply some structure to our creative writing. So think of writing a story a bit like baking a cake. If we include some certain ingredients, we can give our stories some depth, lots of flavor, with a sprinkling of adventure. So over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to briefly touch upon 6 key ingredients which we can include in our writing, and they are characterization, settings, plot, dialogue, theme, and visual descriptions. So 6 ingredients. So let's start with characterization. So this is, very simply put, the process of creating characters. Characters are central to any story, and I'm sure, like me, you will undoubtedly have your own favorite characters, whether they're characters in books or films or TV shows or radio shows, and we all have our own favorite characters. Just imagine a story without any characters. It would be pretty boring. So characters are really important. And when we develop characters, we want the reader of our story, we want them to have some sort of reaction to our characters. We may want them to really like and love our characters, or a character. We may want our reader to really dislike our characters. Regardless, we really want to generate some sort of reaction. So when we develop characters, there are 4 things that we can bear in mind. So number 1 is, what do the characters say? What do they say in the story? And we call this dialogue, which I'll come on to a bit later on in more detail. But essentially, what the characters say, we want that to be reflective of their personality. So what they say and how they say it, and the words that they say, the words that they express, and their interactions with other characters, that kind of reflects who that character is. Are they a good person or a good positive character? Are they devious and evil and conniving, or jealous or spiteful? So really what we want through the dialogue is we want our characters to say things which, again, give our reader a sense of who they are as a person, or as whatever your character is. It could be an animal. It could be a sock or a cup. It could be, the character could be anyone. So that's number 1, what the characters say. Number 2 is, what do the characters do? So, what actions do the characters take in our stories? And again, we want what our characters do, the actions they take, to be, again, reflective of their personality. So it should be true to who they are as a character. And then 3 is, how do we describe the character? So what do they look like? Are they tall? Are they big? Are they thin? Do they dress in really colorful clothes? Are they kind of big personalities that are quite commanding or dominating, or are they quiet and reserved? So again, we can describe our characters, which again can really bring them to life for our reader. And then number 4 is, how are they seen or viewed by other characters in the story? So what are the dynamics between one character and another? And again, this can really build a sense of feeling from the reader towards one or more of your characters. So we want that kind of dynamic, that relationship between different characters in our stories. And these are some ingredients that can create characters which our readers can really resonate with in a positive or a negative way. But as I said, regardless, we want to generate some sort of reaction from our readers. So that's characterization. So let's move on to settings. So once we've created some characters or a character, now we want to think about where our story takes place. So the setting is the environment in which the story is told. So it could be a place, it could be a dream, it could be in another time. You could set your story in the 1800s, or back when the dinosaurs were around 65 million years ago. So in our stories, often, the books that you will read at home, you will often find that stories are set in lots of different places. And so the story will move from different locations, different scenes, different settings. And we want the reader to understand where the story is taking place at any point throughout the story. So we want to keep the reader updated on where the story is taking place. And we want to bring it to life. Again, like our characters, we want to help our readers to visualize, what it's like. What does the setting look like? What is the environment look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? And so we want to bring that world to life for our reader. And again, we want the reader to kind of, to jump into the page and to feel like they are there. So we want to transport them into the world we are creating. So, 3 things to think about when we're creating settings in a story is just number 1 is to decide or choose a place or a number of places where the story will be told. So it could be in the future, it could be in the present, it could be in the past, it could be in a town, a village, a seaside town, a country, a different planet. Just think about where the story will be told. And then likewise, I just touched upon there, think about a time when the story will be told. So again, it could be in the future, the present, or the past. And then number 3, bring our settings to life through the 5 senses. So kind of see, what does it look like? Touch, what does it feel like? Taste, hearing, and smell. So we can really kind of, again, transport our readers into the environment we create through those 5 senses. So now we've created some characters and we've decided where the story will take place, when it will take place. Now we want to think about the plot. So the plot is essentially the structure of the story. So it's how and when and where the story begins, how the story then unfolds, and then how the story ends. So creative writing, like I said at the beginning, is all about expressing yourself. It's kind of letting the words flow out onto the paper. So we don't want to be too formulaic when we're writing. By that, I mean, we don't want to be always following the same structure to every different story we write. But again, there are some key milestones that occur in a lot of stories that we can use as a guide. And I call them the 7 steps to structuring our story. Quite catchy title. So these are 7 steps which you can think about in your story. And I can almost guarantee that any book or film that you read or watch will have at least 5 of these 7 milestones in them. So number 1 is the introduction. So that's how we introduce the characters, the setting at the beginning of the story. And at this point, we want the story to have some sense of normality. What is normal life like for our characters in this setting? So we want to have some sense of normality. And then we have, for milestone number 2, we have an incident. So something happens which changes everything. So it could be an event like an explosion, or it could be someone new arrives in school who is bigger and stronger and meaner than everybody. But we want something to happen which changes the life of our kind of lead character or characters. So number 1 is we want to introduce our characters and the environment in which the story is told. And then number 2 is something happens which kind of changes things. Number 3 is action. So this is where, in response to the incident, our lead character or characters decide to kind of spring into action, and they want to, solve the mystery, or they want to seek justice, or they want to right the wrong. They basically decide, they set off on a mission to kind of do whatever it takes to get his or her life back to where we were at the beginning of the story, which is back to a sense of normality. So that's number 3. And then number 4 is adventure. So our character or characters embark on this adventure through the actions they have decided to take. And this is a big kind of section of the story. This is where there's a lot of fun and twists and turns and action and different character dynamics. And we can really start to take our reader on a bit of a roller coaster journey. And then number 5 is setback. So something happens which kind of puts the brakes on our character's progress. So it's, something where you feel like it's a real kick in the teeth. You are disappointed for your character. You feel like that this is a big hurdle for them to climb, and it's a real setback. And then number 6, we have salvage. So this is where our character or characters find some inner strength, and they manage to kind of pull it out of the bag, and they kind of overcome that recent setback, and they get back on track in righting that wrong or seeking justice, or kind of solving that mystery. And then number 7, the 7th milestone, is the finale. So this is the kind of ending of the story, and this is where we kind of try and bring to a conclusion a lot of the plot, and we kind of answer some questions which the reader may have had. How did that relationship turn out in the end? Or did Johnny find his dog? Whatever it may be, we want to kind of try and bring the story to a satisfactory conclusion, so the reader feels satisfied. Of course, if you're writing a sequel to the story, you may want to leave some things open. You may even want to end on a cliffhanger. But generally, if we're kind of writing a one-off story where we have a kind of beginning and a middle and an end, at the end, we want to leave the reader feeling satisfied. But at the same time, we want that element of surprise in there, where there could be a little twist or something unexpected happens. So that's plot. So that's kind of the 7 milestones which you can think about when you're writing your stories and structuring your stories. So far we've covered characterization, which is the process of creating characters. Then we've talked about settings, which is the environment in which our stories are told. And then I've just talked about plot, which is essentially how we structure our stories. Now we're going to move on to dialogue. Dialogue is simply how our characters talk or communicate with other characters in our stories. Part of dialogue, especially in terms of how we format dialogue in a story, is quite technical. And so we won't discuss that right now, but just as a tip, I would, when you read your next book, and whatever book that may be, have a look at how the dialogue is presented within the book. And you'll get to see how a typical story will be kind of structured and laid out on the page. And that can give you some ideas on how we write dialogue in a story. But again, dialogue is so important in a story because going back to characterization, how our characters express themselves and the words that they say is so important, and it can really drive the plot. It can bring your characters to life and really keep the reader engaged. So 3 things to think about when we're writing dialogue. One is, giving our characters a unique voice. So we want, in an ideal world, you could strip out in your story, strip out all of the narrative and just leave the dialogue in there, almost like a movie script. And in an ideal world, if you really gave each of your characters a unique voice, the reader would be able to tell which character is speaking at any one time, even though we're not telling the reader who is actually saying those words. Because, we think about how people talk. Some people may say certain words or phrases quite often. Some people may stutter when they talk, or they may have an accent. We all talk in slightly different ways, and we want to reflect that in our characters. So we can really think about our characters and how we want them to express themselves in our stories by giving them a unique voice. And secondly, on dialogue, just kind of furthermore to that really is, we want our characters to sound real. We want the dialogue to sound authentic. So let's just say you write a story which is set in a council estate in the Northeast, kind of where I'm from. And your dialogue is all, really kind of Queen's English. Everyone is speaking really clearly and really quite well spoken. That wouldn't necessarily reflect the characters that you've created. So you could include, if they're from the Northeast, you could include some local dialect or slang that is used in that part of the country. But essentially, we want the dialogue to be authentic. Not many people speak proper Queen's English. In fact, I would hazard a guess that it's less than kind of 5% of the population in the UK. So we all have our own quirks, our own weird and wonderful way of expressing ourselves as human beings, and we want to kind of get that across through our characters. And then thirdly on dialogue is how we format dialogue. That's a bit technical for me to include and talk about right now. But again, like I said, what I would do is when you're next reading a book, just have a look at how dialogue is set out on the page and how it looks. And that will give you some hints. There's lots of great resources online as well for you to take a look, and I'll probably do another video on dialogue specifically. So let's move on. So far we've covered characterization, settings, plot, and dialogue. Next we have theme. So themes are essentially the messages and meanings that our readers take away from our stories. Every single book that you have read will have a theme. So a classic example, and this is to kind of exemplify how themes are often confused with the plot. And so if I asked you, what is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory about? You could say Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is about a little boy called Charlie who lives in a very poor household, and one day he wins a golden ticket to the incredible chocolate factory, to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and he goes there, has an adventure, wins, and you could explain the story. That would be the plot. The theme of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is the classic underdog theme. It's kind of the young boy who comes from a poor family, but is also very polite, is also very clever, and the other young children who visit the factory underestimate Charlie. So it's a classic underdog theme to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And so most books and stories or TV shows will have a theme: good versus evil, friendship, love, coming of age, which is kind of like the underdog theme. And so for me personally, themes is where we can share a little bit of our feelings about the world, how we feel about certain issues in the world or certain problems in the world, and often themes come out quite naturally. So you could sit down and say, right, I would like to write a love story with a good versus evil subplot, and then a twist at the end. That would feel, to me personally, quite calculated and quite difficult to do. And it might work for you when you write your own stories. But really, if we come up with an idea for a story, and then from there we build the concept by developing some characters, and we create the setting, and then a plot, the theme will happen quite naturally, and we shouldn't really have to think about it too much. It will happen by virtue of creating really great characters in a setting that we bring to life, with an action-packed and fast-paced plot with plenty of twists and turns. The themes will naturally come out. Finally, number 6. So just to recap, we covered characterization, which is the process of creating characters. Then we covered settings, which is the kind of the place or the time or the location of where our stories are told. Then we had plot, which is the structure, the kind of sequence of events in the story. Then we had dialogue, which is how our characters interact and communicate with each other in our story. And then we had theme, number 5, which is kind of the underlying messages that come out of our story, that our readers take away when reading the stories that we've written. So finally, we have visual descriptions. And this, which is number 6, kind of touches upon everything which we've just covered, because this is how we really try and make our stories feel real to our readers. It's our job as an author to transport our readers into the world we're creating. And so we've always got to think about how we describe what's going on in the story, through the settings, through the characters, through the dialogue, and this is really important. And so I hope you see so far that all of these different ingredients within creative writing are kind of interlinked. So let's just have a look with visual descriptions. So if we explore visual descriptions through the lens of characterization, once we've created characters, we want to be able to describe them. What do they look like? How do they act? What are they doing? What actions are they taking? If we think about it through dialogue, visual descriptions, a great example of using visual descriptions in dialogue is facial expressions, body language, and this can really lift our dialogue and again take it to another level and bring the dialogue to life. So visual descriptions, which is kind of the 6th ingredient, this is kind of sprinkled throughout the other 5 ingredients, and it's really important because it kind of lifts everything, brings everything to life, all of the different components of our stories. And so you can see that all of these different ingredients, these different elements of writing are all interlinked. They're all part of the same family. They all overlap and they all come together. And so I hope that makes sense. You know, we could talk about this for hours and really go into detail. And I will do some more videos where we talk about each of these ingredients in more detail. But for now, I would just like to leave you with 5 tips, my top 5 tips, which can help you to develop your writing. So number 1 is what I said right at the beginning, which is do not worry about what other people think about your writing. Just write for your own pleasure, for your enjoyment. Just do it for fun. If you enjoy it and you have fun, you'll do it more. And if you do it more, you will get better. Practice makes perfect. Take notes and write your ideas down. So this is so important. Our brains think about what goes on inside our heads. You know, our brains are always working. They're always ticking along. And we can often have ideas which pop into our heads. And then 1 or 2 seconds later, that idea is gone. And we may never get it back. I often think there are ideas floating all around us, and we've got to kind of grab them, get them into our heads, and then we've got to kind of put them somewhere so we don't forget about them. So whether you carry a notepad around with you, or you know, whether you have a device that you can make a note, but if you get an idea, write it down, and you can always come back to your idea at a later stage and build on your idea and develop it further. Read books. There is no better way to improve your writing than by reading books. Read different authors, different styles of books, different types of books. Get a sense of, you know, how authors write their stories, how they, the style, the format, how they describe characters, how they bring the setting to life. It's kind of like listening to music. You can take little bits from different artists and create your own style and your own taste. So read lots of books. Number 4 is practice, which I touched upon in the first tip. You know, just keep writing. You know, write your ideas down, and then, you know, build on those ideas. Just write. Sometimes I just write without even thinking. I'll just write, and whatever comes out, I just let it flow. And if it doesn't make any sense, I can just delete it or ignore it. But again, just write. Just let it flow. Let your imagination run wild, and see what comes out. And then number 5 is what I think is really important, because in this day and age, lots of people have devices. Technology is all around us, and technology is undoubtedly an incredibly positive thing in many ways. But also, it can actually prevent us from being aware of what's going on around us. So, you know, often I love to kind of observe, people watch, and kind of just absorb what's going on in the world around me. So whether I'm in the supermarket or I'm in waiting for a doctor's appointment, kind of instead of reading something or reading a book or writing, you could just kind of just see what's going on around you, and we can take inspiration from all manner of different people we see, different people we meet or speak to or overhear in a conversation. Anything can spark our imaginations and ideas. So just be aware of the world around you, and it's a great source of inspiration. We can find inspiration in the most mundane and boring of environments. So that's my final tip. So thank you very much. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of creative writing in less than 30 minutes, I hope. Yes, bang on. 10 seconds left. So thank you very much. Take care and see you soon.